As creatives, we don't talk about this enough. We have to stretch ourselves and take risks to be satisfied by the creative. We have to constantly push ourselves outside of our comfort zone for it to be interesting for us to feel satisfied. But at the same time, when you push into constantly more unknown spaces creatively, it gets scary and it gets stressful and it gets uncertain. An untapped territory is that artists need to treat themselves and be treated like athletes, in that we need to take care of ourselves, we need to coach ourselves mentally and maybe even physically sometimes to prep ourselves for the sport of creativity. And that's anything from self-talk, positive affirmations, to just sometimes eating better.
Today I'm speaking to PJ Richardson, who doesn't need any introduction, but he is the co-founder and executive creative director of Laundry. And Laundry are one of the most impressive top motion design agencies in the world. So very lucky to have him, and let's get into it. You can't see it at the moment because there's a little bit of sunlight destroying it, but where I wanted to start was with your book. And you were kind enough to sign this for me at Paradiso last week, and I looked through it and I love it. It's books like this that made me want to be a designer. Like, it's just beautiful images and it's great. And also, though, you share a little bit of your story throughout it, and there's some kind of insights into the way you think and your history. So that's why I wanted to point that out at the start, because I might reference back to that at a few moments in kind of when we chat.
Absolutely, whatever you need.
Laundry's been going since 2006, which is, we're coming up on 20 years, and the industry has changed so much and the world's changed so much. So, like, how have you done that? It'd be interesting to hear about how Laundry's evolved, how you've evolved over that kind of time.
Yeah, well, that's a big question. But yeah, we've been at it for quite a while. I think how we evolved. It's ironic because as much as things have changed naturally as they should, a lot hasn't changed either. We're still working in Cinema 4D since the start, After Effects, Photoshop, sometimes less and less, but a lot of the same tools. And we've just stuck with it and just gotten, I would say, considerably better at it over a very slow amount of time. But my business partner, Tony Liu, has been very good about this, about not trying to rush or be overnight successes. And it's not for us to decide anyways, but it's just been a slow, constant growth contraction. And I think it's really probably fairly impossible to sum it up into one thing, but if I could, I think what's kept us going this long is curiosity, both creatively, business wise, for better or for worse. Like, to constantly be curious about new techniques, new creative, new styles, old styles, but also curiosity to figure out how to continually run from the business side of things. And curiosity is sometimes new good things, but then it's curiosity sometimes being like, why did that go badly? How can we improve upon that? So I think we're relentless about that, honestly. And also him and I are both, we're different personalities, but we're very much the same in the sense of being very curious about the details. I think is one thing that's really kept us at this for so long. And there's so much more to that, but that is a summation is what I think has kept us going. As far as what's changed or what we've seen change, I think it's the big obvious stuff. Like, a lot of this started with just TV commercials for us or broadcast graphics or something like that. But social media has obviously changed a humongous amount of how we absorb the content, mainly in terms of short form stuff for the most part. And so I think navigating that, and then of course new technologies of literally every shape and form that sort of spill into that, and trying to keep up and ahead of it is, I think, some of the biggest ones.
And this kind of new technology is something that I was interested to get your ideas on, and that most recent new technology being AI. And so I'm interested to hear about how Laundry uses AI at the moment.
Oh, a trillion ways. I think there's obviously a fear about it. Every time it gets better, everybody gets fearful. And certainly some of our artists, and at times even myself. But we know it's not going anywhere, and we've gone all in on it in a variety of ways. Big obvious stuff is we'll use Midjourney, we'll use Luma Labs or Runway. And let me back up. There's still the legal clearance part of it. So that prohibits us from using generative AI in a commercial setting in most general cases. But the way that we use it a lot is Midjourney for concepting, and then we'll either doctor it, modify it, or just 99% of the time just outright recreate it in production. So we use it as like an imagination spark, and then combine it with other things or techniques to get us into production or commercials or branding or stuff like that. So on a generative level, that's probably how we use that the most. But there's some subcategories to it, like we've used Midjourney for background matte paintings, or I've used Runway to roto out traditional footage for commercials we're working on that we know we can get away with it with, and we're short on time or budget. We use a lot of AI for more less creative tasks, like in 3D, like remeshing, or RotoBrush and After Effects has some AI engine to it. So it comes up in, or for 3D tracking, or one of the big things that we're all pretty hyped on. It's not actually that new to us, but we've been using a lot of Gaussian splatting and LiDAR scanning stuff, pulls heavily from AI engines to mainly just to speed it up. And that stuff's pretty interesting to us. So I just filmed a commercial or a couple commercials in Florida the other day, and we needed some animal shots, and we were definitely using AI in combination with VFX to generate some animals that we couldn't shoot on time, or we just needed duplications of in the background for almost like film extras a little bit. So in that case, we'll use either a photo or a Midjourney render, go through most likely Luma Labs, because it, for us at least, it handles more photographic stuff better, and then incorporate that into our pipeline.
You are using it for any kind of boring stuff as well, the stuff like behind the scenes processes, or
Yeah, we use it. We'll use ChatGPT all the time for even like presentation pitch decks, and or even how to organize sometimes workflows and pipelines in terms of, hey, what about this? And my general, like, overgeneral rule of thumb with AI in most cases, it gets you about 60 or 70% of the way there, and then we have to go in and make it actually like specific to our needs and that kind of a thing. But it's, from an administrative level, it's like it's relentless right now how much we use AI to help us on different things.
yeah, that's interesting. Something I've found useful at the moment, or surprised me how good it was these deep research tools, where you send it away to spend 10 minutes searching the website and thinking about it, and then comes back with a report. And it's impressive. I think it's dangerous as well, because like we know that AI hallucinates.
Yeah.
But like the more thoroughly it looks like it's thinking, and then it creates like a nice report, you're like, oh wow, it knows its shit. But
That's the challenge for sure. I think we're all worried about the accuracy of it, and it's actually sometimes, especially on ChatGPT, a lot of the times we're noticing that it's often inaccurate, especially when a new model comes out. You're like, oh, wait a minute, that's not right. So I think you have to be a fairly objective and not doubtful, but I think it's just like anything, you just have to double check it sometimes.
so how much time do you allocate at Laundry to research and development?
Oh, a lot. We have several. Like, I put in about an hour a day personally, maybe a little more sometimes. And then we have a thing called Laundry Labs and Spin Dry, which are both kind of two programs. And Laundry Labs is more new technology experiments that we check in with and have projects going on fairly regularly. And then Spin Dry is more of a stylistic visual think tank where we're doing constant experiments with our artists, pretty much year round. And they're not super duper formal, but it's like we make the most of all of our time. If anybody's down on a project, we full staff production meetings every day, and so if someone's down for a day, we're like, all right, jump on Laundry Labs, jump on Spin Drive. So we're constantly pressing on new styles and techniques as well.
That's cool. Like, how big is the team at the moment?
About 50, and then we have varying degrees, either about that or maybe freelancers in somewhat of a matching number, depending, sometimes less, sometimes more.
Yeah. And are you, we spoke a couple of years ago, and I knew like you're well known for doing your daily art experiments and exercises. Is that what the majority of the book is, or is that kind of a mixture of it is?
Yeah, and I've tapered off of it just because of life and travel and stuff a little bit, but the way that came to be is I got a little bit older and was like, I lost sight with all the business stuff of what I like to do, which is to make things. And so at the same time, we also were running into a lot of kind of like new business problems where people were really keen to work with us, but we're like, oh, you have this example of this thing on your site and on your portfolio. And we're like, no, but we can do it. We wouldn't get the projects even though they liked us very much. And I had enough of that go on that I was like, all right, I gotta game this system a little bit, and started just making piles of things that I liked, that I was seeing lots of asks for, and try to get a crossover there. And at the same time, it was both really satisfying and then also had me learn to be able to be a lot more visually or technically hands-on, to be able to creative direct teams with much more specificity. So it just became a win-win-win process to do.
Yeah. How long would you say you were doing those for?
About 5 years.
Yeah. And would you say like it's helped your career?
Tremendously, like immeasurably. I think the one thing that people always ask me is like, how do you have time to run a studio and do projects and do design dailies? And I'm like, there's always that element of like imposter syndrome or self-doubt about the style or the work or anything like that. And it's somewhat impossible, I think, for that to ever go away. But I think that the hypothesis I had was to just do it in spite of it. And sometimes I spend 2 hours a night if it was like an animation or something, but mainly I'd spend anywhere from 20 minutes to maybe an hour a night, which is a very small amount of time in the grand scheme of things. And just tried to out this hypothesis that a little moment every day over a long period of time would build up an incredible amount of productivity and new things learned. And it definitely worked. And the other big part of it is brutal mentally, is sometimes I can let myself get wrapped up into it. Posting it on the internet was hugely helpful, because it let, particularly on LinkedIn, it's like the best sales tool humanly possible. Like every client I was, oh, I saw your stuff on LinkedIn, or reminded me to call you about such and such. So it was pretty helpful in that way.
Yeah. And it's something that's like obvious, like as a creative, you should be practicing it, and getting better at it. But
I was just going to say the exact same thing. It was way less about the end result and more about, I always make this analogy when I talk about this to a butcher, of like just practicing sharpening the knives so that when the real customer gets there, you're ready and you're not trying to wonder if you're going to make the perfect cut. You're like, how do I make this cool? Because I feel confident. I've been doing this every day for forever. I got ideas, I got techniques, I got moves, you know what I mean? And that's, I think, a very powerful tool. Creative interest either can often be very subjective and sometimes riddled with self-doubt.
yeah, this is something that I wanted to talk to you about as well, and it's this area of mental health. And you just mentioned imposter syndrome, and being at Paradiso and hearing like a lot of these talks from even like top level designers, and it sounds like it's something that never goes away.
No, I don't think it does. I don't think it ever fully goes away. What do I think about this? Recently, this past, I've struggled. I go up and down with it, mental health wise, depression wise, stress wise. It's a really curious thing. I think as creatives, we don't talk about this enough. I don't think we have to stretch ourselves and take risks, I think, to be satisfied by the creative. I think we have to constantly push ourselves outside of our comfort zone for it to be interesting, for us to feel satisfied. But at the same time, when you push into constantly more unknown spaces creatively, it gets scary and it gets stressful and it gets uncertain. And I think so it's almost like a yin and a yang. You have to have both, because if we did the same thing we could do all day, every day, I think we'd all get somewhat bored of it, and we'd feel stagnant. So it's a double-edged sword of powering forward into unknown creative territories or hard territories just to we'll challenge ourselves, but also create sort of struggle and doubt because you're like, I'm doing something I haven't done before. So it's, I gotta always make the analogy to like being a motorcycle jumper. You just want to make the jump bigger and bigger. And it's the fear of crashing or of anything. And sometimes you do crash. And then when you land it, you get all the glory and you're like, "Ah, we pulled it off. We pulled off the jump. We pulled off the job, the pitch, whatever." And you're like, all right, now let's make the jump bigger. I think it's that. My theory, I was talking to Marcel from State about this in a way the other when we were in Paradiso, actually. And I think an untapped territory is that artists need to treat themselves and be treated like athletes, in that we need to take care of ourselves. We need to coach ourselves mentally and maybe even physically sometimes to prep ourselves for the sport of creativity. And I think it's anything from self-talk, positive affirmations, to just outright sometimes eating better. And I know there's an argument, I do see it hugely, that a humongous amount of creativity comes with tension and conflict and sometimes stress. But that's been my new theory lately. I think sometimes we just expect that we should know what to do, or that we're the only one. The "we're the only one" trap is huge. And you just touched on it, Luke. I'm sure we all thought we were the only one that was struggling with such and such. And then you've got a parody said, I don't know that he said this, but let's say, for instance, like Stefan Sackmeister or Gene Mung, someone say, "Oh, I was struggling at such and such." You're like, holy shit, it's not just me. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And I love this analogy actually, because it's something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Like I was going through burnout last year, and it's like, just to recover, it's like putting your health first, like physically and mentally. But like I find it fascinating to think about it like an athlete. How do you optimize your creativity? So something I wanted to ask you actually is that, do you have any routines that you do to protect either kind of your mental health or your creativity?
two. I think I've tried every single thing humanly possible, from massages to yoga to medicine to vices, toxic ones, to journaling, to books. The two that have really stuck with me, and let me just first say, it's not for everybody, but deep breathing meditation has been a game changer for me. And not necessarily, a lot of people do it on the app. They do it for 5 or 10 minutes. Great, start there. But I don't do it as much as I'd like, but at least once a week, sometimes twice, I'll go to a 50-minute deep breathing meditation class that is like, it borderlines like forced hyperventilation meets like sometimes just outright screaming in the meditation, but it does a really wonderful job. And then I run at lunch sometimes, a lot of the time. Like I go for a 40-minute run at lunch, which if you're in Mexico City, like I think you are, takes on a whole new level with the altitude. But those are two things that lately have been pretty great for me.
Well, it's really interesting. Like the breath work. Like I interviewed a guy. I've done a little mini series on burnout as well. And I interviewed one guy. He's got something called nervous system mastery. And it's about regulating your nervous system. And one hack to do that is through kind of breath work that kind of stimulates your nervous system in a different way.
Absolutely. But what we can also say too is I'm pretty far down the path, both age and the pursuit of not stressing the fuck out. So this is where I'm at like now, but like some other things I think also earlier in my career that really helped it, particularly for people that are middle or earlier in the career. There was a book by Julia Cameron called Morning Pages, Creative Journal, something to this effect. And I would use these for years, and it's basically a book where you write 3 pages by hand every morning, and you just dump your thoughts out. And it can be sometimes, and there's prompts in it. There's guides you in and around mostly creativity. But some days you can just be like, I hate my fucking cat, or my boss is a dickhead, or whatever it is. But I did these for years and years, and it really helped me find my balance creatively, and I guess confidence maybe a little bit, or maybe not confidence, but it's taught me that about sort of the cycles of creativity, and that it's going to be all right, that certain things that felt really foreign or where I thought I might be stuck were just phases you go through. And it helped make the journey up and down a bit more comfortable in a way, or a little bit more familiar, and also helped lock me in creatively a lot more. when I was younger and just didn't really trust myself or know how to trust myself.
I think that's an interesting point you make as well, that you've tried a lot of things to see what works, and different things work for different people. And maybe it's different things work for different people at different points in their life. Like, used to work for you, like you've moved on from journaling. Is that just because, did it stop working for you, or did you just find more efficient ways of getting to the same?
It comes back to the very beginning of this conversation is just curiosity. I think I'm constantly, relentlessly, metaphorically, of course, turning the dials. And I don't think it didn't do anything. It wasn't bad. I just I found something else the newness of something else to get my enthusiasm and attention and focus. Yeah, there was no real reason except that I just life took me somewhere else.
Yeah. Like newness is another thing. I think as creatives, like you've mentioned curiosity a couple of times, and and becoming bored with things. And I think maybe creatives more than other people have this propensity to want to do something new.
I think so. Yeah. The novelty.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about, so you mentioned your struggles with kind of mental health in the past, and you said, I'm going to read it so I don't screw it up. You say that the biggest savior you found was being service to others, personally and professionally. So can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I've struggled with addiction in the past. And one of the things they tell you there is often one of the best remedies is being of service to others. And I think it's ironic because in our industry with motion graphics and production and all that, we're a service-based industry. But I think my self-doubt and imposter syndrome had it as such that I was so fixated on my own self-worth and progress and accolades and all this stuff. And it just ate me alive because of my own past and childhood and traumas and such. And what's so dangerous about that mindset, I think, is that you can get really fixated on it and it never is going to be satisfying, because it's just in the same way as creativity, if you achieve one thing, then you're just going to want some other thing that's even more self-worth fulfilling. And on top of that, doing the work that we are doing, spending so much time doing it for me or for an award or for my own ego, do not really garner us as much success or any success really as a studio, certainly in terms of growing our business. And so when I switched that mindset to being of service to others, particularly our collaborators and our artists too, it wasn't literally overnight, but it was like a light switch went on where it just changed everything for us. The work got far more interesting. Our collaborations got much more positive, and the work got a lot more interesting. And we got away with a lot better and more interesting creative that often we would get turned away from or told we couldn't do. Like, I'll give you two specific examples on both ends of that spectrum. So on the artist side, being of service to others, it means this. It means for me, there's a trillion examples and applications, but I'm working on a project. I say, hey, I need a motion graphics piece for such and such. Okay, go. Artist goes, they do it. I hate it. I'm like, I'll know it when I see it. Just make it good. That's like the stupidest, most vague creative direction you could possibly conjure up. Instead, I'll make these very detailed creative briefs that say, here's the goal, here's the design, here's the reference, here's a picture of where I want it to go, the details, runtime, specs. Here's the first piece that I want you to do, but just because this is what I think the client's going to want. But let's do option B and C where you can expand it and find some new ways to do it. But being in service of the artist to give them as much specifics and clarity as possible garnered much more accurate results, clear results, and then with a space for them to play, but within a space that is still within where we want to be. And then that's where the design dailies thing comes in as well. We're doing all that work. I could have much more specific conversations creatively and technically to help guide them and give feedback in a real way. Instead of, I know we'll see it. It'll be like, what about this thing in Redshift with this lighting setup or blah, 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 blah. And so I think that's what I mean by it means doing a lot more work, but but in the short term, at the expense of not having it be confusing or vague or ultimately frustrating in the long term. On the client side, it's the same sort of mindset of being as detailed and specific as possible with how we pitch or how we work. Like, one of the biggest things is that even the most seasoned of clients don't really know or understand animation. And even if they've done it forever and ever, and often scared of it. And we analyze that. We're like, wait a minute, I get it. It's because not there's so many different types of animation. So we spent a lot of time creating these guidance documents within our projects to say, hey, this particular project is this type of animation. Here's the process and steps up front. So when we're at this point, we want you to comment on this point, you want you to comment on this, and so forth. So they feel like, oh, okay, I get what we're doing here. And then they're a lot more comfortable not giving us design notes on the last day of animation, so on and so forth. The other part of that too is really just, this is the curiosity service part of just really listening to the clients and being like, what do they really want? What, respecting their ideas is not being shit ideas, and not getting into that mode of they don't know animation. Of course they don't know animation. That's why they're fucking calling us. But taking their ideas, respecting it, doing them, giving them different surprise alternates, and having these very specific, real dialogues with the work. And I think that's what being of service is to others. And it's wonderful because they feel heard, and then and they know we're paying attention. And it just changes the level of respect tremendously. And then we're in it together to do some really good work. Now, do we get some less collaborative clients? Yeah, but far less.
So maybe we can pull on that kind of collaboration thread a little bit. Like you've said, community is very important to you. And I think that maybe like in this area of social media, we're less collaborative, like we're more lonely, probably, even though the opportunities are out there. How do you think like AI is going to impact community in the future? Do you think that collaboration becomes more important, or do you think we'll become like the one-man agency that's doing everything on their own as they can speed up processes and do?
Okay. People may not agree with this, but I'm not worried about AI amounts because two reasons. I mean, we're in a very unique time in the world, but generally speaking with business, the easier something it is to make or create or produce, the cheaper it gets. And the cheaper it gets, the less people want it. And creativity is always a novelty game. They always want the most unusual, unique, not completely unique, like not completely avant-garde, but there is a medium there where it's like unique enough that the most elite agencies, brands, clients in the world want. The easier AI gets, the more common it is, the less it's going to fall into that category and just become kind of like what happened to video on YouTube a little bit. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is there are people doing AI or CGI work or any motion graphics work that is exquisite, beyond the level of some of the biggest and best studios in the world. But the problem is that it's not the problem, it's the reveal, is that client projects, let's just put it in the commercial level, not the art side for now, are hugely based on collaboration and trust, and always will be. So is there a project that a small studio in Poland can do Buck's doing the exact same way? Absolutely. But Buck has relationships with said brand and a size of a company and a body of work for a very long time that garners trust and collaboration. And I don't think that's ever going to go away, ever. As long as there's human beings, I don't think it's ever going to go away.
Yeah, people want to do business with people.
I mean, the work is the base. The people-to-people relationships is literally everything. At least that's what we see at Laundry on our sort of sales pipeline stuff.
I think AI is obviously a source of anxiety. Like, how do you think designers and creatives should be thinking about AI? Is it a threat? Is it an opportunity?
I think it's the same thing as anything else. The only danger is if you don't try. Like that's or the big danger is if you don't try. Look, you were there with me, so we can overlap on this. But and I love them, and I love that they ended up being they're the sweetest couple I've ever met. But Vale Dumel and Perdisa had that wonderful AI exhibit. They show a bunch of AI stuff on social media, and they're all in on it. At the same time, they're doing their non-AI based stuff nonstop as well. They're graphics and 3D and production mixed stuff, and they're not stopping on that either. It's more like a, or it's just one more tool in the toolbox. And I do believe that, but I think that they illustrate a really good example of just trying to just push it like anything else as far as you can.
Yeah. Their installation was incredible. Like they've got the AI video one end of the room, but then they've built like a house, but they've lit it like a stage. Like their art direction's incredible. And then they had kind of 3D figures in there as well.
I think the thing too that I know it's a human tendency to want to put everything in a box and a category and be like, AI, 3D, but we see this and they illustrated it better than anybody is when you mix it all together and just say fuck it to like labels, it's incredible. And I know that I'm just going to use them as an example. I don't really know the process thoroughly, but I was talking to Julian about this and I think they were both saying that they're not like being like, oh, let me do a Keith Haring animation and copying some artist. Like they're running their own photography and designs and assets through a model and then creating new outputs that's their own AI from their own work. So it's like they're just using it again as a tool to amplify and find and experiment with their own work in the same way that you would run a Photoshop filter on your own stuff or an After Effects effect or something. You know what I mean? And it's just, so it doesn't seem weird to me in any way. I'm working on some graphics for a feature film, and I had this interesting conversation with the VFX supervisor about AI, and he had the same questions, really had the same stuff. And he was saying that at one of the visual effects companies on the film, he asked the same question you asked in a way. And so are you guys worried? You have 1,000 people at your studio. Are you going to have to downsize to 100 people because of AI? And their response was epic. They're like, absolutely not. They're like, think of it this way. With AI, we're 1,000 people, and now we can do the work and create creative pursuits of 10,000, not be afraid that we're 1,000 that need to come down to 100. And so it was a glass half empty, half full thought and moment to me that I was like, yeah, like what creative insanity could come up with the power of something like this? Let's push that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does. I think it comes down to being an optimist, essentially.
100%.
And I don't mean in the sense of being a techno optimist, like everything's going to be great. This is going to create a utopia, because I 100% don't think it will. I think like AI is going to cause new problems, like in a similar way to social media did. Like starts off very nice, and now we're all addicted to our phones and don't speak to the people like stood next to us and all these things. Like AI is going to cause new problems that we've never thought of, but it's also just not being afraid of it and just, okay, what can I do with it? What can I do that I couldn't do yesterday? And as much as I think it is a threat, I think it's both. One of those thoughts, one of those mindsets is useful, and the other one is not useful.
I think it's obviously way more powerful in terms of the corners of our culture that it's going to find its way into, which is just about everything. But I can't imagine that it feels that far off from like traditional graphic design to like Photoshop on a computer. Like that was a substantial jump, and it feels a bit like that. I think we're going to be all right. I think it's just going to change how everybody works dramatically from what we're normally used to as far as design industry shifts.
Yeah. Let's see if we have time for my last question, because that one gets a bit darker. Let me ask you, so you mentioned Josh Davis is one of your inspirations. So do you code, and are you excited about these new AI coding abilities that are rolling out?
Oh, I don't code at all. So I don't know, not in any real significant way. So I don't know. My collaborations with Josh have been mainly on the art image mashup side. But obviously I don't even know the breadth. Josh is the wizard. He uses everything, combines and thrashes everything together, and comes up with these insane outputs.
I think we're like on the cusp, although maybe it's a little bit. I think you probably still need the basics of coding to even push it a little bit further. But we're on this cusp of vibe coding when you can go to these language models and go, this is what I want to do, write the code. And I think as artists, we're going to be able to build more things, like build a little app that you couldn't do before. You could do it, but it would cost you a lot of money and a lot of time and effort. And now you can hack something together that's like probably absolutely terrible, and any developer would cry if they saw it. But you can make these things.
That's the thing that I think it comes back to where we started on like ChatGPT a little bit. And I think I agree with you. You can make anything with just enough effort, or very little effort, I should say, including code. I think it's just putting in that objective it generated code to make this thing, but is it as efficient as it could possibly be? Or does it not work very well once running? And then you have to go back in and figure out how to optimize it with AI or whatever. I think it's just the process of just keeping at it like anything.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you another thing that you mentioned in your book, and that is you talk about a moment where you got fired from working with one of the most prominent designers in the world. So now you've got a lot more experience in the industry. Like, how do you think about these moments of failure?
I very reflectively. I don't necessarily. Sure, I feel shitty about something if I see something as a failure. I was just telling one of my several teammates about this last week. It's been especially hectic and crazy and chaotic recently. I really embraced diving into it. But a lot of my team is like, it's understandably, especially everyone's get really stressed out. Oh, we're gonna pull this off. Da, 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 da. Tell them like we never ever not pull it off. Like we never ever. And so just being like, we're gonna land a plane no matter what. That all being said, there's certain moments where you may not win a pitch or something like that. And you look at that and that feels like a failure. And you look at it and my old self would just take it so personally. And now, yeah, I feel badly about it because I want to win and I'm competitive and certainly the business side. But you look at now, we just do postmortems. We look at, hey, what could we have done better? What did we miss? What were we not? We optimize. We learn from every perceived failure. I think there's so many sides to every different thing, but I think there's one element of it is just I think embracing it. I think it gets your attention more when something feels like a failure than when something feels like a success. I think there's room for growth and improvement in failure. And I've learned to not look for it, but when it happens, to look at it closer and not take it as such a setback. There's a whole emotional side of it that you just feel like complete shit. And I still do sometimes if something doesn't go if it goes badly. In that example at the beginning, in the book that I talk about, I think there's a whole other element of that particular case where I got a job working for this designer that in the end, my younger self shouldn't have known better and I didn't, but it just wasn't the work I wanted to do, the personality. I was just not even remotely close in alignment with who this particular designer was. And he's grown up, awesome, celebrated, and it worked out perfectly. It was not where I should have been. But I thought that's what it meant to succeed, was to work for this renowned designer in this particular space and style and mindset that just wasn't me. And so, but that failure pushed me to find my tribe a bit, and I certainly did, which was ironic because the person that I found that was my tribe was the guy named Seth Epstein from West York, who, I don't know if you caught his presentation. He was one of the first ones at Paradiso.
I missed all the plot.
Yeah. So it worked out in the end. I think
That's cool. So you touch on something there, really, and it's really about purpose. It's about when you took a job with someone and that was the outside world's view of success, or at least it's what you thought the outside world needed you to be successful. But really, when we talk about purpose, it's about finding your own path and about finding the things that interest you. And like a book that was been important to me recently is Simon Sinek's Find Your Why. And again, it's something that you mentioned in your book. So can you tell us a little bit about like how you went about finding your purpose?
Absolutely. Yeah. I talk about this I didn't really get into it in the previous one because it was just such a different format, but I talk about this in talks all the time. So my growing up childhood was a lot of darkness, but I figured out fairly early on that sort of emotionally first, and then through the work that I started to do, that my why was to find and create a sense of joy and fun and happiness, mainly as an escape of where I was at and where I was at mentally. And that was something that really stuck with me pretty much immediately with the type of work I wanted to be making. And you see it in the book that we made with Hector, that it's just all about color and vibrancy and spazziness and craziness. And that's not an accident. That's totally a reflection of creating visually a world, sometimes as an escape, sometimes as an aspiration of what I want to be and live in. And that was an easy why to find. It was sort of subconscious and then became conscious. But I see a path forward in any different speaker, any different artist. It doesn't have to be that heavy duty. It can be like, I just like typography. That's my why. Or 3D, or I want to tell stories, or I just want to get the fuck out of my city in the little town I live in. Like that could be enough. And so that's where I think that's where you can, at least in creativity, that's where you can find your why, decide that's your path forward. It could be that you just want to go, you don't know how to articulate. You want to go work for Man vs. Machine because you just like what they make. And that's a perfectly good why for me. And you like 3D. That's great. That's easy. Let's do that. But I think it's a free world. Do what you will. But I think the one track that is out there is that a lot of people fall into is trying to do too many things and be like, my wires, I want to do it all. But then it's a very tricky one of doing everything but nothing at the same time. And so that's just the balance we all have to find, I think.
Yeah, you said something that like your purpose can change throughout.
I got that from G Monk. He said it like this. He said, redefine yours. Don't be afraid to redefine yourself or to reinvent yourself. And amen to that. Like I got started in typography and then vector graphics in 3D early in my career. Just absolutely crushed it. That was like my thing. And then at some point fell in love with 3D for a very long time to find my path there and then lately, almost purely by accident, has been a mix of 3D and live action. And it's, I think we all need that. We all need to evolve into our skill set. Some don't though. Some just like to do the same thing for forever, and that works for them. And that's great too. There's no one way.
Yeah, I think it's important, like your kind of your purpose, your mission, whatever you want to call it, can evolve, but it's about finding your values. I can say that maybe your values that you spoke about are kind of being curious, also finding joy and fun in the work, and another one you touched on is community and helping other people.
Because I didn't really finish the thought, or we didn't really finish the thought on community and just how I would triple down everything on community, because you're right. With AI, with social media, it's so easy to get stuck, and I think especially with remote work, it's so easy to get so isolated and so stuck in our own isolation, physically, mentally, every which way. And look, we all don't get to, most of us don't ever get the chance to have a parody, but you saw it, I saw it. It was incredible. Many conferences are like that, to just be all together. It makes you appreciate the work you're seeing a lot more too. Like Sometimes you see all that stuff on the internet and you're like, you just scroll past it and don't really take it in. And then you're next to the next meme, the next piece. But to see that be locked into a room and have to, I don't mean this as like it's bad, but to have to hear the talk, the explanation, but be able to sit there and be focused on it. And then to be able to celebrate the good and the bad with people together, just like we're doing, like we did with other friends. I don't think there's a better therapy and more disarming experience to possibly have. And we're all still like in complete honeymoon phase from that, and probably will be for a while. Like it was just same as when we were at off in Mexico City. It was the same way. You just take that and you're like, oh, wow, yeah, that makes me feel good about this industry of life. And I get that every time.
It's true. It does. I'm the same. It boosts you, gives you a lift, and inspires you.
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's a great place to end it, and we've come up to an hour, so I really appreciate your help for that. Like, I was going to ask you how we deal with kind of purpose in a world of AGI when AGI starts doing all the things. Like, it starts doing the work, and we don't have to go to work anymore.
Here's the thing about it. The last thing I'll leave you on that is we, and everybody's different on this, but we all still have taste. We all still have story. I think that's the one thing with AI. Like you see it on LinkedIn, you're like, of all the things that you could possibly generate with AI, that's what you made. So you can see bad tastes and decisions made with impossibly perfect AI. So it's,
yeah, taste is going to continue to be important. So thanks, PJ. I guess we spoke about your book a lot. Where can people find it?
I'm getting a big batch from Hector because I had no idea. I thought that was just going to go in the bag and given away. I had no idea that it was going to be what it was. But I have a big batch coming. I'm gonna put it online and figure out how to get that all sort of sorted out, and I'll keep you posted. So thank you.
Coming soon then.
Coming soon.
Yeah. All right. Nice one. Thanks, PJ. Appreciate this.
All right. Thanks, Zeke. Take care.
If you like this video, you love our weekly newsletter, sign up at designresources.ai.